This is JadeCast, your gateway to traditional martial arts and Chinese culture. Brought to you by your host, Shuffle Jonathan Bluestein. Welcome back to JadeCast. I'm happy to have you here again. So today's subject is how do I prepare for a surprise attack? And some would argue, rightfully so, that you can't because it's a surprise attack. You don't know what's going to happen. But, well, there are a few things that we could prepare for. We could prepare our bodies to react in the best possible manner to whichever thing comes. Now, there is something that we know is bound to happen to a lot of us that we can prepare for, and that is our activation of the sympathetic nervous system. So, just briefly, for those who are not familiar with this, the nervous system has several aspects or branches to it. One of them is called the sympathetic nervous system, and the other is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And there are a few other aspects of the nervous system that I wouldn't be discussing right now. The sympathetic nervous system is what many people know as the fight, freeze, or flight nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is that part that relates to what we call rest and digest. In other words, the sympathetic nervous system, which has to do with fight, freeze, or flight, is that aspect of the nervous system that wants to turn on when we have an emergency. The parasympathetic nervous system, the part that has to do with rest and digest, is the part that we want to spend most time activating because it helps us regenerate, feel good about ourselves, love, be healthy, etc., etc. We are resting and digesting. All right. The problem we have here is, in terms of how our bodies developed for the eons, they really want to kick in that sympathetic nervous system when there is an emergency. Like when we suddenly spot a bear very close to us. Or maybe there's a fire and we need to run away and make quick decisions. But the problem is that the sympathetic nervous system, when we get into that mode of having to either fight, freeze, or run away, when we are in that sort of state, we are not reacting so skillfully. We would be reacting like a panicking animal in an emergency, which at times is exactly what we need. But if we cultivate martial arts for training for months and years and decades, then what happens is if the sympathetic nervous system activates too much, it would put us in this emergency mode, and everything we have trained to do in the martial arts is going to fly out the window. This is the main reason that martial artists, especially in the traditional martial arts, have such a difficult time actually applying all of that stuff they've trained for years once an emergency comes their way. They might be very good practicing solo. They might even be excellent using what they know in friendly sparring or even sparring with someone from another martial arts school, as long as their bodies and their minds know that, okay, this is a sort of friendly or sportive type of scenario, my life is not in danger. But the moment their lives are in danger and that sympathetic nervous system kicks in, well, then they have a problem because that nervous system has been brewing and growing and developing and honing its grip on your body for countless generations, and you would have a hard time bypassing it when it hits the fan. And what we want to do actually as martial artists, most of the time, is we would rather be able to keep the body activating that parasympathetic nervous system. It's the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which also would balance it out. Because if we can activate the rest and digest, then we wouldn't nearly as much so be in that mode of fight, freeze, or flight. Now, how do we do that? Well, I can give you an advice on how this can be done and also about how this can be trained. So listen here. This comes from my studying and teaching of the internal martial arts of China, which is what I do on a daily basis. And those martial arts typically contain the following wisdom. There are 3 relatively simple mechanisms that which if you activate them in your body, then you would be able to regulate that sympathetic nervous system and gain more control over the nervous system, so you could many a time keep yourself more in tune with the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest. So when it hits the fan, when you have an emergency and you have to physically react, that you'd be able to keep enough of a calm in your muscles and in your mind, so to react with actual martial arts skills and not panic and just throw your arms about as if you hadn't been training for so long already. So what are these 3 mechanisms that I've been talking about right now? Very simple. The first one is you just touch the tongue at the roof of your mouth. As simple as that. And I won't get into why these things work, all right? That would require a whole entire lecture on its own, but trust me on this. You can try it and you'd see it does work. So you want to place the tip of the tongue at the roof of the mouth. How do I know where the roof of the mouth is? Very simple. Put the tip of the tongue on your upper front teeth. Then go with the tip of the tongue above the upper front teeth. You'd have a small mound. And continue to go above that small mound with the tip of your tongue, and you'd reach a small valley. From that point and up, that's considered the so-called roof of the mouth. So as long as you keep the tongue there, that's good. That takes you more in the direction of the parasympathetic nervous system of rest and digest, and less in the direction of the sympathetic nervous system of fight, freeze, or flight. So that is one mechanism. Second mechanism, you would like to straighten the back, almost like a table, and stretch and elongate the spine. Straighten the back and stretch and elongate the spine. For this, you have to make the small of the back, the lower back, convex. You have to push it out somewhat, so the entire back creates this table-like flat surface. Well, we can't be entirely flat. We weren't made in a carpentry shop, but we do our best, It's mostly flat. So that's the second mechanism. And by straightening the back and elongating the spine and especially making the lower back straight, this contributes to ourselves being more in parasympathetic mode and less in sympathetic mode. So that's the second mechanism. And the third mechanism would be to breathe to your lower abdomen, to the area called dantian, or in Japanese it would be called tanden or hara. Now I would eventually make a lecture specifically about dantian, tanden or hara, but right here I would just mention, so those of you who are new to this would know it's very simple. Take 3 fingers, hold your 3 fingers horizontally and put them right below the belly button. Okay, the top finger just touching the bottom of the belly button, and then take a finger up from the other palm and put that finger just below those 3 fingers. So 3 horizontally held fingers touching the bottom of the belly button, held horizontally. You take a finger of the other hand, you put it right below those 3 fingers. In that point, in the middle of the abdomen, not on the surface level, not on the skin, but in the actual middle of your musculature there, That's your lower abdomen that I'm talking about. That's the dantian or hara or tanden in Japanese. Now, you want to lead your breath there. It's not that the air physically goes there, but you want to lower and root your breath in a manner that would inflate that area and would feel as if you had pushed the air all the way down there. Okay, so that's the third mechanism. Those 3 different mechanisms, and I remind you again, putting the tip of the tongue at the roof of the mouth, straightening the back whilst elongating the spine, and breathing down to your dantian. Each of these 3 mechanisms by itself is useful, but combined, the 3 of them are exceedingly useful in achieving our goal that we have set out for ourselves right here, of not allowing the body to overt an activation of the sympathetic nervous system and trying to keep the body in parasympathetic mode. Okay, so these were easy enough to describe and understand, but how do I make sure that I actually am going to do those things when I have to face a surprising violent scenario or surprise attack or anything like that? Well, a method I have developed myself over the years, and I bet an endless amount of martial artists and teachers and warriors, over the decades have come up with this. It's not something. It's not a work of a genius, all right? You might have been able to come up with this yourselves as well. Is that we have to use everyday frightening, alarming, or surprising scenarios to practice that sort of skill. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean this. Do you have someone you care about, family member, a spouse, a child, and does it not happen at times that, God forbid, that person almost drops something really hot, or is almost, again, God forbid, being hit by a car, or gets stabbed by a kitchen knife, or slips and falls, and we have this moment, right? Because it's someone we really deeply care about, and we don't want anything bad to happen to them, and we have the moment. Or the same if something almost happens to us or to our cat, or any sort of scenario like that, when we are suddenly surprised, alarmed, frightened. Could even be you slip while walking down the stairs, or someone bumped into you. During that second or two, you might be, shaken just a little bit, or suddenly, unexpectedly, someone yells at you, someone you don't know. Something happens. I mean, we have an incident like that at least once every day or once every few days, don't we all? So what do? We use those types of scenarios as training. Whenever something like that happens in our everyday lives, as soon as it happens, we go back to the thought of, I have to use those 3 mechanisms. Oh, I just slipped down the stairs. Even if I fell already or I just caught myself, immediately in the 5-10 seconds following, I don't want to allow that adrenaline to flow in and screw up everything for me. Rather, at that same moment, what I do is I breathe to my dantian, I straighten my back and elongate my spine, and I place the tongue at the roof of the mouth, the tip of the tongue at the roof of the mouth. I use those 3 mechanisms as soon as something like that happens. And then it becomes a habit. I do it once, twice, I try to remember. You try to keep this in your mind after listening to this lecture, and you just keep doing it. And you do it for weeks and months and years, and it's very simple to do. And then you find out eventually that suddenly when you have to face a potentially violent situation, or you're being surprised attacked by someone in some capacity, or maybe it's just a person trying to pickpocket you or rob you or whatnot, suddenly you realize that all of that training has become a habit, right? And now you didn't really have to think about it. Whenever something happens, your body is prepared to not go into that sympathetic mode. Rather, the body has the cultivated awareness that allows it to remain, both body and mind, in the parasympathetic mode of rest and digest. Not perfectly so, but enough so that you can use your actual hard-earned, hard-trained skills from the martial arts in a manner that would make them useful rather than flailing your hands about like a gorilla. Alright, you see? It wasn't too difficult. It's actually quite simple. We just need to do it consistently over a long period of time. Thank you very much for listening. And if you like that lecture, first of all, hit that subscribe button, folks. We need to build up this channel, right? And if you're interested in more interesting insights and ideas and lessons as such, then by all means, you should look into the books I have written and published over the years. Go to your favorite Amazon website, whether it be Amazon.com or Amazon.ca or Amazon.fr for France, and you can type in the search box either Research of Martial Arts, that's one book, Research of Martial Arts, or The Martial Arts Teacher, or you can just put my name on there, right? Jonathan Bluestein, and you're going to find me out and look and be able to see all my books and the hundreds and hundreds of positive reviews that very kind individuals have left for them on Amazon. And if you'd like to reach out, I'm available on email at jonathan.bluestein@gmail.com. Same on Facebook. And please, if you like the channel, if you like those videos, share them. Share them with friends, students, colleagues, teachers, whomever you see fit. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you next time.